Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. From First Paw Media, sponsored by First Paw Coffee Company, this is the Dog Driver Show. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now here are your hosts, Robert Forto and Kurosh Parto.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is Robert and I'm here with my co-host KP and we are the Dog Driver Show. Be sure to check us out wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. And today we are talking to a dryland musher calling in from England. Her name is Vickie Pulin, and she has a very interesting story, doesn't she, KP?
Yeah, I know Vickie for a while, actually. First time I saw her, she was in the Dog Power movie that Kale put together, and it was kind of interesting to see a sled dog driver from England, actually, which is pretty rare, actually. So I've been following her on social media platforms for a while to see how she's climbing up the ranks of our sport, and she's doing phenomenal, actually. Vickie, how's everything going in England?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got all started in the sled dog sport out there.
Yeah, no worries. So I went to Canada when I was 18 and did a husky ride in the Rocky Mountains, and that's kind of where I fell in love with the sport. And then it kind of just snowballed from there, really. 10 years ago, I set up a company called Arctic Quest, where I do sled dog tours in the UK. And then 5-6 years ago, I started racing competitively. And 5-6 years on from there, 34 dogs later, traveling all around the world, racing and living life, really.
That is fantastic. Vickie, told me about this organization, Arctic Quest, giving rides. Is this something common in England?
No, not massively. Like, obviously, most people associate sled dog tours with, like, Scandinavia, Alaska, places like that. So we're quite unique. Having said that, I'm not the only company that does it. It's kind of growing. Like, there's a few more companies that have cropped up recently. But we're all quite unique and we're all quite different in how we run things. So Arctic Quest has been going 10 years. And very much it's hands-on, and we teach you how to drive the dogs yourself. So it's not like a passenger type of sit on the sled and we take you out for miles, because we can't really do that in the UK very easily. So we get a little bit more hands-on and actually teach people about the sport.
That's fantastic. I know that in Alaska, sled dog racing and dogs in general, this is part of our culture. It's not uncommon to see dog trucks going by you when you're driving on the highway. In the UK, is it still a novelty to have sled dogs?
Yeah, I think the sport, especially like with the sprint racing, is definitely growing. So things like canicross and bike tour are a lot more accessible. So we have something over here where we do a park run, and on a Saturday, millions of people from all over the country get out and run, and people can do that with their dogs as well. So it's helped kind of market the sport and put the sport out there a little bit. But with the bigger teams, and like obviously with no snow in the UK and very limited in Scotland, that side of things, then definitely more of a novelty still. But it is growing, and there are some really great sled dog people from the UK.
You mentioned you have a larger kennel compared to some of the other people that I talk to in the UK or Scotland. Tell me about your dogs and what you have going on.
Yeah, pretty much got every type of sled dog you can have. So I started with Siberian Huskies, kind of where everyone starts in this sport, I guess. Then I got some Alaskan Huskies, kind of bought the wrong dogs for sprint racing. Then I got some Eurohounds, and then I got some Greysters. So I race Huskies and the Gracers, but all sprint racing, so short distance.
And how many of them do you have right now?
How many dogs?
Yes.
34 dogs.
And do you take care of all the dogs by yourself, or you have handlers and helpers?
No, I do it all myself, but I have a really amazing friend who she looks after my kennel when I'm away racing. So she's kind of part of the team, big time.
So the dogs are family then, huh?
Every bit.
That is outstanding. That's what I hear from more and more and more of the drivers. These are, individual athletes, and we are just a coach and our family. That's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. You've been racing for 5-6 years now. Tell me about your racing career, what you have behind you.
Okay, cool. So, went to my first race in Paris, and it was an IFSS WSA race. And I went out with a husky who was bred for showing. I had no idea of kind of the level of the sport in Europe or in the world. And it was an amazing eye-opener. Like, I learned so much in that first race. Like, I didn't even know people race hounds. So I went out with my little red husky, and we came kind of middle of the field, super proud. It was an amazing race. I can remember everything about it. And it really inspired me to want more. I just wanted to learn as much as I could. I wanted to work as hard as I could. So I worked with some amazing mushers from this country and from around the world. I invested every penny, every ounce of time that I could into the sport. I got some more dogs, so my kennel grew. And basically, especially on the snow, I started off in Germany for my first snow race on sprint racing. And I finished last. I was 5 minutes off the last team. Super proud that we made it round. My dogs are amazing. They did nothing wrong. It was an amazing race. There was so many spectators. And that's where I met the guys from Dog Power Movie. And that was kind of the start of the sprint racing on the snow. And this year we finished 8th in every class we did on the snow. So from starting off at the back to kind of creep into top 10 in the world, it's been an amazing 5 to 6 years, just a roller coaster.
You mentioned something very interesting. You said you invested every single penny. Is it a sled dog sport an expensive sport?
I think it depends what you want out of it. When, for example, we've obviously just finished this winter, and for the British Championships, I race in 4 classes. So I raced 11 dogs in the 6-dog, the 4-dog, the 2-dog, and the bike. So that's 4 entry fees. Then it's you need to take a trailer and a truck, so it's more expensive on the fuel. The number of dogs I have, they eat a lot of food. All these things mount up. So the sport can be... there is an initial cost to the sport because you are working with an animal. So I would say that it's not something that's ever going to be cheap, but you can make it as big or as small as you want, depending on what you want to race. So looking after 8 dogs is going to be a lot harder than if you're working with 1 dog.
Vickie, you mentioned that you enter in several different classes. Here in Alaska, when we enter a race, our races, they have a purse, means that we get money back, actually, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, different races, different purses. Is this something common that you have in England, or is it just for glory and a medal?
Glory, medal, and usually a bag of dog food. We don't race for money. I've never raced for money in my life.
Do you think this is something that's going to happen sooner or later to assist some of the mushers with these sponsors?
Okay, this is a really good question, and I don't know where I sit with it. There's a lot of different opinions in the UK with racing for money, where people think the sport can go in a good way or in a bad way. For me personally, if I won money, it would be amazing because it means I could invest that money back into my team. And I think money can provide education, and just the more we continue to learn about these amazing dogs, the more that we can invest into their welfare and looking after them. Having said that, I can see that if people start racing for money, sometimes people may not put the dog welfare before the purse. So it's very mixed feelings in the UK, especially, I think, from what I've experienced.
Vickie, you mentioned traveling with your dogs, and you have to go for pretty much all the continental European races. You have to go across the ocean or the channel, I guess. How do you organize all of that?
Yeah, it's pretty intense. Like, I do a lot of trips because I race Huskies and Hounds. Like, sometimes I'm away 4 or 5 times in Europe in a year. Obviously, the cost is really hard. Then you have to make sure, like, the dogs' passports and all the paperwork for the dogs is up to date, and make sure, like, your van or truck or whatever you're traveling in is gonna make the mileage, and you have to organize everything you're gonna take. It is really a lot of work.
And do you have quarantines to go in and out of the country, of the UK?
No, up to this year, it's been fairly straightforward. Like, even when I raced in Canada, logistical nightmare with flights, but quarantine and paperwork was not so bad. But now that Great Britain have come out of the European Union, we're going to have to do a little bit more work to travel, which is going to add to the expenses for us, from what I can see.
So if tomorrow I would like to take a, I don't know, 2-dog bike tour team and come and race in the UK, I can just come and fly without quarantine. Is that right?
That's right. You just need a passport and a wormer, and because you're flying from the US, probably a health certificate as well, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned passport, and a lot of our listeners, they probably think about the regular passport that we have for a human being. Tell me what is a passport for a sled dog or a dog is.
So a passport has, like, all the valuable information, like the chip number of the dog, the date of birth, and all the information that it needs. But more importantly, it's stamped with the rabies vaccination. So our dogs have to have had rabies to travel in and out of the country. And also we store all their vaccinations in the passports and things like kennel cough as well.
That is interesting. Very cool. Tell me now, let's switch from dry land to snow races, because you race on snow also. How do you prepare yourself for snow racing? How do you gain experience on a sled?
Yeah, it's super hard, right? From a country with no snow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I use a water treadmill to help condition the dogs so they have some good mileage behind them before we even leave the country. And then each year I try and get in at least a training week before we race. But it's really hard. Like, you can't make fake snow. So we run in a lot of wet weather fields and stuff to kind of make the dogs work their feet more, and it's kind of the closest thing that I can think that resembles the snow. But it's super difficult, but not impossible. Like, somebody said to me once in the UK, Vic, you'll never win a medal on the snow because you're from Britain. And that's made me really hungry to prove that person wrong. Because I think it is possible, but everything has to be done right for the dogs. So the training, the mileage, the conditioning, the diet, everything, and experience. Like, the things that I found hardest is because I don't spend as much time on the snow. It's things like the mileage is further, so maybe a harness that you race dry land won't work as well on the snow. And also things like their feet, to make sure the dog's feet are okay in the snow, is very different from running in mud. So it's all those things which I've kind of gained experience over the last 5 years, and I'm definitely still learning that big time.
You know, when I lived in Europe in the past, we did to gain experience on snow. We used to go to camps, actually, like we call them training camps, in the Alps mainly, and to get experience on the sled. What do you do for that, for your experience on the sled?
I just took myself out and found races and places that we could train, but I've never done a snow camp with anyone. Having said that, I did work with Eagle Track from Poland, and we did a lot of work together for 2 or 3 years on snow. So we went to Italy with a friend and we trained together, and that was super helpful because he has more experience than me on the snow.
So basically what I'm hearing is that when you're racing on a sled, it's the only time that you're on a sled. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe like a week before each time. But yeah, like in 5 years, I think I've done, I don't know, maybe like 10 10 snow races with huskies and hounds, and maybe 5 weeks of training before.
That's fantastic. That is so cool. That is so cool. Tells people that even if you live in a country and a place where you have only dirt and grass and everything, you can still be very competitive on a sled. That's really impressive.
Vickie, I have a couple of questions. It's going to take a couple of different directions, and I would like to backtrack a little bit to what you said about the purses or the money being offered for racing. What are your thoughts on sponsorships of individual persons or teams? Do you agree or disagree with that?
For me personally, I agree, because without my sponsors, I would not be doing what I'm doing. So I massively agree.
And are your sponsors, are they local to Britain, or are they more of a worldwide type sponsor?
Definitely Britain.
And how do you sell that to them? Since a lot of folks may not know about the sport. It's a fringe sport in of itself, just because it's not basketball or football or soccer or something like that. How do you sell that to the British folks when they may not know much about it?
Yeah, like you summed it up completely there. Like, it's such a small sport in Britain compared to things like football. So if you go to a company, I can't get them to invest in me or my dogs. Like, there's not enough return for them. The people that have sponsored me, I've just, along my way, come across some amazing companies and some amazing people. For example, one of my biggest sponsors, they were a client that came to my husky rides, and they invested in me and my dogs. And over the last 3 years, they have become some super awesome friends, and they have supported me so much. And then, for example, two other, maybe all the people that support me, with dog food and equipment, these guys are people who are already invested in the sport. So my results and the work that I do help promote their products. So there's a link there straight away, if that makes sense.
Yes. My next question is more of a perspective question for our listeners. And remember, a lot of our listeners are not involved in the sport. You had mentioned that you travel quite a bit for races. What is the furthest distance from your home to a race? What is that distance in terms of miles or kilometers? And how long does it take to get there by car and all the other types of transportation to make that possible?
Okay, this is going to sound really bad, because all I do is pop the destination in the sat nav and then drive. But driving, the furthest was Sweden this year for the European Championships, and it takes me 2 to 3 days to get to that place safely with the dogs. But the furthest place I've ever raced was when we flew and raced in Canada. But I don't know what the mileage was.
Yeah, that's quite a chore in of itself, and I'm sure KP is going to invite you over here to Alaska before we close. But my last question to you, Vickie, is the question I ask all of our guests. And you've been involved with the sport for about 5 or 6 years and been involved with dogs for about a decade. If somebody were to come to you and ask for advice, and you could give them one piece of advice, just getting involved with the sport, what would you tell them?
To always love your dogs.
Hey.
Because without the dogs, there is no sport. So I think that is the most important thing.
That's great advice for sure, and it's cut and dry. If you don't have that, you definitely don't have the other pieces as well. KP, anything else for Vickie?
Yeah, Vickie, you mentioned having sponsors, and this is a great platform. Actually, if you want to thank any of your sponsors or shout out anything, it's time. Who are your sponsors?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. CSJ Dog Food, they fuel my dogs. Dawn and Jonathan are amazing sponsors, and Fast Dog for recovery for my dogs, Canine Trail Time for equipment, and Leisure Lakes Bike Shop for servicing my bikes. And probably my biggest sponsor of all is my dad.
Vickie, Robert mentioned that I will probably invite you come to race in Alaska. You coming from a country where not a lot of snow is on the ground, and a lot of sprint races are only on dry land. How people conceive us Alaskans in those countries?
Okay, cool. Alaska was kind of, especially with the long distance racing, that's why I got into this sport. I started off running in Alaska and Canada and in Scandinavia, reindeer skins and Alaskan Huskies, and going out for 20k a day and minus 30, and that's kind of my history within the sport, and things like the movies and the Iditarod and everything else, that inspired me. But because I live in the UK, I can't race like that, and that's how I found sprint racing, and I've now got a passion and a love for what I do, I guess you find that kind of more in Europe than you do North America, but obviously there are sprint races in North America as well. I just love meeting anybody who loves dogs.
Fantastic. Vickie, I wanted to thank you for the time you spent with us. I definitely am inviting you. Come and race in Alaska in our circuit. You will enjoy it, and we'll be following you on social media. And good luck with your training season and racing season. And we'll talk to you very soon, I hope.
Thanks so much, guys.
Very good. On behalf of my co-host today, KP, this is Robert for the Dog Driver Show. And for all of you young pups out there who listen and watch on YouTube, we are available on YouTube. Go to ak.dog/YouTube, and you will find our channel there, and you can hear all of our episodes on YouTube as well. So with that in mind, we'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.
From First Paw Media, this is the Dog Driver Show. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you can see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert Forto and Kurosh Parto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.